Now it's more about democratizing learning and letting kind of learning come from anywhere and everywhere. So, I mean, we're definitely on that journey and still figuring out how that's all going to fit for us, but at least it's now kind of a tangible thing that we want to aspire to and bring different voices in. And so all of that, I think, made it really relevant to launch a corporate university in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And then another magical sort of alignment of the planets happened, which is, when I did a little heads up to our executive committee saying, hey, just a reminder, next week, we're going to launch Sanofi University, a series of webcasts for all of our people around the world, really excited, and it'll be great to, get the offer out there. And Paul Hudson, our CEO, sends a little note saying, hey, how can we really do something exciting for our people around learning? And so we kind of had a chat and, I said, look, if we really want to stretch the idea of investing in yourself and investing in learning, especially if you're stuck at home and maybe you have more time on your hands. For some people, that wasn't the case. Invest in learning. And so we launched this challenge to the entire organization, this was in March. We said, hey, do we think that by June, cumulatively, we can achieve a million hours of learning between, all of our people around the world? And we got to, I think the last number I heard when we were looking at the numbers in June was 860,000 hours, which wasn't the 1 million, but I gotta say, I was like floored by the level of dedication and investment that we saw from our people. And we had a Yammer community and people were posting their certificates and taking pictures of what they'd done and talking about what they'd learned. And it was just phenomenal and exciting. And so I think, Danny, what seemed like a really scary thing when it was like, do we really want to launch Sanofi University, actually turned out to be the perfect timing, and we got incredible visibility and support around it.
That's a great story. Amazing. Congratulations on that. That's good. And I think
Thank you.
I think your timing turned out to be really impeccable. I mean, we've seen engagement levels around learning. As you pointed out, people have realized that the world is changing, and one way to prepare yourself for that is to smarten up. And I think we're seeing all kinds of data on all kinds of learning platforms that really illustrate a similar trend. So I think your timing was just great. I'm interested in a couple of things that you said there. One, I like this for Sanofi, by Sanofi idea. And I want to just kind of probe on that a little bit. To me, that means culture of learning, people learning from each other, collaborative, social forms of learning. How do you think about the future developing? And let's just pick for Sanofi, by Sanofi, for example. How do you see that playing out? What experiments do you want to run around that principle?
So that's a great question and something that actually I'm very passionate about. So there's a couple of things for me in the for Sanofi by Sanofi that are really critical. And the first is that, as you said, there's a today and there's a tomorrow around that principle. The today for me is explaining to people that things like what learning is available is going to become more and more reflective of what people are actually using. So I realize that's like a really basic concept, but a lot of organizations aren't sort of tuning their learning offer to where the interest and the time is being spent. And I want people to be able to engage with what's available to them because they know that it's something that's reflective of what the organization is using. And I also want it to be filled with voices from within the organization. We hold lots of expertise inside Sanofi. So, why would we need to go other places to learn from, the great people that we have inside Sanofi? So what that's translated into is we're now being a lot more deliberate at looking at where people are spending their time and what are the areas, what does that start telling us about the areas and interests that people have? And that's, one lens that we're applying. We're also making it a lot easier for leaders to create podcasts or create videos that they want to share with a broader organization. So there's sort of support tools and little how-tos to help people do that so that we can really start mixing in different voices. But as you said, Chris, for me, the real opportunity is that sort of full democratization of learning, and that learning is happening between people, within communities, and that we're creating ways for people to find each other and learn from each other and share with each other that start aligning to kind of the different needs that start bubbling up in the organization. And also, that we can make really explicit how it connects to things like our strategy and our culture. So we're not there yet. We're actually starting to take an even deeper look at our sort of learner-centric approach in learning and how do we want to move into different technologies to help inform that. But it's still early days. And the message at the moment is really about making it tangible and real for Sanofi. But I do want to move in the direction of kind of social learning and connections and community learning, because that's what makes a learning organization really agile.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think about you're a science company, right? And science is about community solving problems together and learning together. And I'm sure there's a lot that you could pull on from the sort of scientific aspect of what your company does that might provide some models for you. Very, very interesting. I was going to ask a little bit about how you connect generally with the rest of the talent functions in Sanofi. Are you part of a talent system, or do you think of learning as a discrete thing? What's your point of view on that?
I definitely think we're part of a system, whether that's happening explicitly or not. There's a connection, because the moment you're talking about talent, you're talking about talent development. And the moment you're talking about talent development, you're talking about learning. So it's all connected. At the moment, the way the system works in Sanofi is we have our talent management system and definition, so our high potential definition and all that good stuff, owned by our talent team. And that intersects with us in the way that we're two things, probably very concretely. The first is we're getting data from our talent teams about sort of profiles, needs, et cetera, to help inform, how we're fine-tuning what are the different development solutions that we're trying to achieve. The second way is specifically how we're making explicit the idea that you own your own career. So as part of our talent narrative, we really want people to kind of step in to how they want to develop as talent in the organization, and really kind of making lots of things available to people and seeing what's helping them, because the underlying principle there, and we've created a lot of virtual and sort of self-driven learning solutions, which can take lots of different forms like e-learning, but sometimes it can be synchronous sessions with different members of the community. But the thinking there that, different people might have very different needs, and it's actually better to have a lot available and have people start choosing and seeing where they gravitate, rather than being prescriptive of, you're in this part of the 9 box, and so we're going to put you on this program. So those are the ways that we're explicitly connected to the talent system today. And obviously the idea is that we'll continue to evolve that, particularly as our skills definition starts becoming more explicit. We're in the process of trying to create a more aligned skills taxonomy across the organization. So, how do we use that to inform us what we have, what talent we have where, and how it can move, where are the opportunities?
Do you see a future where the talent kind of flows a little bit more easily around the organization, and L&D playing a role in that?
Yes. I guess there's two. I'm hesitating, because one of the things that's really interesting about what I'm starting to see when I look at skills taxonomies that are bubbling up in Sanofi is that we're starting to look for really deep expertise in certain areas. And, like data analytics is one of those areas. But data analytics applies in a lot of parts of the business. So today, it doesn't feel like the flow is there. And I'm really interested in seeing how we can help movement happen across parts of the business that have historically not been, we've not seen that type of movement happen before. I think the pace of how things are changing is so fast that I do believe it will become more possible to do that. And L&D roles in that, I mean, to be honest, for me, it's two things. I think L&D plays a critical role because I think we need to make it easy for people to choose to develop skills and skills that may not naturally sit in their current role. So there's something about just making that possible that I think is a critical role for L&D because we won't know. We won't have everybody on our radar and we won't know when people have the desire and capability to kind of really build another area of knowledge or, reskill in a particular way. And at the same time, I think given how the organization is shifting, I think L&D plays a really important role in saying we have a massive gap in these types of skills. What do we need to do to close that gap so that we don't have to rely 100% on buying versus building talent in the organization?
This is my soapbox right now, Celia. I'm talking a lot about skills and mobility and sort of the connection between them. And I think it's great that you made that connection between making sure that people have access to build the skills that they want, not just the skills in their current ladder, and that mobility. It seems like I love that you're starting to understand the skills that you have in the organization so that you can also understand the holes that you have, which gives a better idea of, where people can move. And I love how this is a discussion about purpose, but we're talking about skills and mobility because you've connected sort of the individual purpose of the individual. That sounded weird, but the purpose of the individual to the purpose of the organization. And I think that's where we're going to see organizations go, but also where we're going to see success come. It's when we can overlap the purpose of the individual with the purpose of the organization.
And I think this is where I'm quite curious about how we can take L&D one step further. And, there's a lot of tech out there, using artificial intelligence and lots of mechanisms to read people and read organizations and try to make, connect dots. Because my belief is that I, as an individual, may not be thinking all the time about my skills. I mean, that's usually the case. I do. I think about that a lot, but I guess it's in my role. But, most people don't. And so obviously we talk a lot about now things like learning in the flow of work or learning in the flow of life or, how the intersection between what I'm explicitly doing to learn and develop versus what I'm doing in my sort of day-to-day activities is blurring. I feel like people need help to connect those dots. And it comes from, and it does come from my value, like the value set that I hold, right? Because depending on what I want in life and what I think in life is going to drive choices that I make around development. And I think that if we can use tech to help make that sort of real and tangible and possible for people, it will be awesome. And right now, the best opportunities are probably using things like learner experience platforms that are making some of those connections between skills and individuals and opportunities. But I hope it will continue to evolve even more than that.
Yeah, I really do too. We've seen some really interesting technologies that are connecting data from everywhere to give the individual and the organization much more information about the skills that they have. And I think you're right. I think data is empowering. So when we push it down to individuals, they're the ones that are, one, most motivated to do something, and two, most empowered to do something about it. And so I'm really excited to see where that goes.
I, on the other hand, worry about taxonomies because I think they can be huge time sinks. And I think there's a lot of complexity around the appropriate level of granularity. I do think AI can pick up on trends, just looking across unstructured data and activity, to pick up on trends that are useful, but I think it's still immature.
Yeah, I think there's a big discussion out there in the data space and in the learning space about ontologies versus taxonomies. And Chris, I've got lots of papers to send you if you're interested in learning about sort of theory behind that.
I'm interested in that too, because we're in the process of building this huge sort of skills library. And I'm like, and I get it because we